Hello again! At the suggestion of a fan, I have decided to delve into the one, the only Lady Siva. Thanks as always to my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible, links below. Now, let me preface this with saying that as an antagonist in multiple different heroes' stories as well as an ally and mentor, Shiva has a wild and varied history. More to the point though is that writers tend to be even more at home altering and shifting villains' backstories than they are heroes, as heroes usually need to remain at least somewhat coherent. Changes happen, but usually over a much longer time frame. For instance, Bruce going from being raised by a relative to raised by Alfred took decades. Meanwhile, Shiva had her backstory implicitly retconned with a one-off comment in a comic she wasn't all that directly involved in, i.e. going from being raised in Detroit, which had mostly been sort of alluded to before then confirmed, only to be just not long after, replaced with being raised in a non-specific country somewhere in Asia, raised by assassins. This story seems to be the one the most recent reboots have also gone with. There's a lot of talk anti and pro with this change, with some regarding the idea, or at least the execution, as being Orientalist, while others think it's the best way to avoid American centrism, and others feel it takes away from Asian Americans. Suffice to say, I'm not qualified to comment on the matter, but not acknowledging it would have felt wrong. Drifting back to my starting point, the fact characters like Shiva have a less fixed canon means that it's harder to nail down core traits, so to speak, hence this being a deep dive and not a common misconceptions video, though we will discuss some of the stranger shifts in her character too, but for now let's cover the basics. Arriving on the scene in 1975 in the comic Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter No. 5, Shiva was here to avenge her sister. Believing her to have been killed by Richard Dragon, she took up martial arts and found herself to be a prodigy. However, it was revealed that the people actually responsible were already dead, so instead she stuck around fighting crime for a bit. Though what is really interesting here is that we got one of Shiva's core traits, at least in my eyes, embodied by this quote: "That is why I enjoy you, Richard. You are constantly running into peril, and peril is my lifeblood." She eventually goes on to become a master assassin. After the crisis, Shiva's backstory was left more vague and had started getting a lot of stuff retroactively added to it. For instance, somehow knowing Willis Todd, the father of Jason Todd, the second Robert, and briefly being considered a candidate for Jason's birth mother. But back on topic. As she moseyed around as a contract killer, mercenary and martial arts master, sometimes doing work for the League of Assassins, though hardly them exclusively, she did so for her own reasons. Not in the monetary sense, but because it excited, intrigued, or otherwise engaged her. This is also reflected in a lot of her better mentorship roles. In essence, what Shiva would do is find people she deemed interesting or to be in interesting circumstances. The latter case is what we had with Richard Dragon. She'd hang around him so long as it was fun. In the case where the person interests her, she would usually identify any issues or influences she feels undermine their development. She'd then destroy them, be it violently or even just with words, and then give them the tools to rebuild themselves before sitting back to watch the spectacle or come in for a direct conflict with them. This can be well seen in her arc with Vic Sage, The Question, in which she destroys his ideology, defeats him, sends him off to Richard Dragon to help rebuild himself, and then challenges him to a battle to determine whether or not he has the will of a warrior, and then basically just vanishing. It's also seen how she gave Cassandra her skills back after her brain got rewired and then killed her to free her of her guilt. These factors also play into why I'm more ambivalent about her mentoring of Tim, as it seemed to lean a lot harder into the idea of her trying to be a corruptive influence. The story is good for Tim, but less so for Shiva. This pops up when she helps Batman recover after Bane breaks his back as well, with her scheming to try and trick him into murder, which feels like a very simplistic spin on her character and generally at odds with her more enigmatic attitudes. She had plenty of stories across this era, as it covered her meeting with Black Canary and Green Arrow, time spent with O-Sensei and more, but I'm not strictly here to do a summary of every story. It's also worth noting that while Shiva is tightly associated with the League of Assassins now, her history with them is fairly inconsistent and fraught, with her even outright working against them during Batman Legacy. In truth, her ideals would not mesh well with them long term. The League is all about imposing their idea of peace and order on the world, or just scouring it of people. Shiva would hate that, as she generally loves the chaotic and violent world she lives in. This also makes her interest in bringing order to the League in more modern comics rather at odds with decades of prior characterization. But rolling back, now we approach a period in Shiva's life that involved retcons and changes in her backstory done very overtly. Long story short, she and her sister were both skilled martial artists, but Shiva, or Sandra, always held back. One of the world's foremost assassins and League of Assassins agent David Cain noticed this and killed her sister. The next segment may be triggering for its references to sexual assault. When Sandra sought him out for revenge but got overwhelmed even as she realised she had been holding back her from her reaching her full potential, it still wasn't enough, not yet, and to survive, Cain forced her to bear his child, Cassandra. So even beyond being the literal worst father in the world, David Cain is also a rapist. Despicable doesn't even begin to cover him. After this, Shiva reached her full potential, having awoken the ability to read body language to the point where she could predict what people were going to do before they knew, a skill shared only by Cassandra. In this period, she also ended up with a cult dedicated to her. She didn't have much interest in them. Now, before we get into her relationship with Cassandra, i.e. Batgirl, it's worth noting that Shiva being her mother was not originally the plan, at least as far as I know. It's an idea that came up later. Beforehand, they were just foils, both at the peak of martial arts, with an endless drive to improve in a shared language only they could speak, while at the same time having diametrically opposed morals, because Cass took one life and developed a death wish and wants to save everyone. Shiva, meanwhile, mostly only valued life in terms of how much it entertained her. Despite these differences, Shiva also seems to have easily been the one able to best understand Cassandra, contrasting heavily with Barbara, who openly admits to not getting her. As noted previously, she restored Cassandra's skills and after killing her, revived her so Cassandra would forsake her death wish, allowing them to fight unabated. Cassandra being the first one to deliver Shiva's first real defeat since she had become the best in the world and managed to avoid killing her too, though that did leave her comatose for a bit. Cassandra also accuses Shiva of having a death wish. This would come up in later parts of their relationship, with Shiva even implying she had Cass for the express purpose of having someone skilled enough to kill her. I don't really think this fits with any of her prior characterization. I certainly don't think she'd mind dying in battle, but that's different to wanting to die. Oh, and Cass did kill her briefly, but brought her back, so yeah. Oh, she also had a fight with Tim after Batman finger quotes died again. I do not care for it, as not only did it end in her defeat, which is absurd to me, but the method of how we got there was too. Basically, Tim needed to know when Shiva would get up the news that Batman had died, when she'd leave, what airline, what plane, what hotel, then rely on the world-renowned assassin to just eat something left on her pillow, and for the drug to work on someone so skilled in martial arts she can bring people back from the dead by punching them. There's cunning, and then there's whatever that was. More modern comics basically remove Cain and have Shiva both be Cass's primary parent and more maternal. Suffice to say, I don't think this works for either of their characters, as it generally weakens Cass and makes Shiva either a flat villain or overly invested in being a mum over being, Shiva. All in all, over more recent years, Shiva's philosophy of complete detachment has seemingly been lost in favour of somebody who's insistent on trying to shape others how she wants them to be. I feel like this, along with the sporadic appearances of her being a corrupter as opposed to a neutral agent of change that can be good or bad, really weaken the character, at least to me. But what do you think? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to support my work or commission 3D art, please check out my Patreon and Ko-fi respectively.